Welcome, everyone. I am Joanne Yu. I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Federation. Thank you all for coming. Obviously, this is a issue near and dear to all of you because there are lots of faces I have never seen before. So welcome to a Federation event. Rarely when you do this work, do social justice work, do you get to do something that validates all the things that you feel. When Ju and I had our conversation at the office, I said, I feel like this panel is really for me, and it's about all the stuff I have to deal with on a regular basis, representing the 55 Asian American members, being a Asian American woman, and being an immigrant, and all the things that make me really unique. And so I'm really thrilled that all of you are here, and we get to talk about something that's really relevant and important. And I want to tell you my story, because this happened to me 2 weeks ago when I was in Washington, D.C. And so Ju said, I should share this story with you because this is exactly what we're talking about. So I was invited by the White House Domestic Policy Council to talk about the state of immigration, the nonprofit organizations in New York City to work on immigration as immigrant. The presidential election is coming up. How do we talk about civic participation? How do we talk about immigration in our community? And to talk about what infrastructure has been set up. So, it was a big deal meeting. There were 10 of us. We were the immigrant rights leaders from all over the country. There's 10 folks exactly. Half of us had law degrees. Half of us had public policy degrees. So if you look at us, we're sort of the model minority, right? So we're walking into the Eisenhower building, and we were passing security. And we're all waiting there, and we're waiting for one of our partners to join us. And then we get these three Caucasian guests as well coming in, and we're standing a little bit of the ways, and he says really loudly and very slowly, so where are you folks from, right? And so I'm not, it was the New Yorker in me, but I had to suppress the Brooklyn girl in me to not say anything. And I just looked over at my friend and I said, you've got to be kidding me, right? And he said, is this your first time in DC? And I said, no, actually, I come here regularly for policy meetings. Oh, have a great meeting. Nice to see you, right? And I looked over at her, and I had I looked over at my friend. She works with the refugee community in the Middle East, in Iowa. I just looked. She's a New Yorker as well. I looked at her, and there was a string of obscenities, and I said, you've got to be kidding me. I cannot believe this, right? And she tells me, don't say anything because he might be the funder that we have to ask money from. So it was that moment when I realized no matter where we go, it's always the fact that they think I'm from somewhere else, that we're from somewhere else. That, when I sit with my friends, my closest friends who are social justice activists, who are funders, who are academics, we always get, we laugh, we have this running joke. How many times this week did you get asked, where are you from? Where are you really from? Because your English is really, really good, right? So so one of my friends who is 4th generation Japanese, she says, oh, I'm from here. And she said, no, really, where are you from? Where are your parents from? And she said, Seattle. The answer is gonna be 4th generation Seattle, but they keep asking, right? So we actually have a running tally. And so, as funny as it is, it's also incredibly demoralizing because for all the education, for all the contributions that we make to improving our city, fighting for social justice, the question is that I'm always an outsider. And so this is something that bothers me. So this is, I actually thought about writing a blog about all the encounters that I've had with this issue. So I feel like, again, thank you all for participating in my little therapy session today. So I want to recognize Stella Aquino. Stella is a funder. Some of you who work in nonprofit know you can't do this work without somebody to write a check to support the work that you do. And so I want to thank Stella, Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, but we're lucky enough that Stella is also our board treasurer. So I want to give a welcome to her. I also want to recognize Grace Lou Volkhausen. Many of you know her. She's a board member as well, but many of you know her as one of the, I don't want to say grandmother because I know you'll be insulted, but she's the godmother of many, many social justice activists in the city. So thank you for coming. So Stella, why don't I let you do a welcome, and then you'll turn it over to start the therapy.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. This is really great. I'm so happy to see all of you. So on behalf of Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield, I would like to thank Joanne, Ju, Wurs Howard, and Winnie, members of the Asian American Federation, for this remarkable partnership that gives our company the opportunity to collaborate with the Asian communities. This topic is very important to Empire Blue Cross because we would like to serve the needs of Asian communities, especially promoting the behavioral and mental health. I would also like to thank our distinguished members of the panel for your time and dedication in increasing awareness of microaggression, and hopefully today you can offer some solutions to everyone. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone here for being here today, and I hope that you can join us in bringing the message and action items back to your respective organizations and communities. At this point, I would like to introduce Hansilo Wang, who is a national desk reporter for NPR News. He's based in New York City, and he covers issues and events in the Northeast for the national programs like Morning Edition, All Things Considered, Weekend Edition, and NPR.org. His parents come from China, and he speaks Mandarin and Cantonese. In 2014, he won the National Journalism Award for General Excellence in Radio, granted by the Asian American Journalists Association. So I'm very happy and honored to be here today, and let me turn it over to Hansi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella. I'm super impressed you memorized that. First, let me say I apologize. I'm going to use my phone tonight to do notes, so I'm not texting, I promise. But thank you very much for coming tonight. This is a topic, microaggressions, that's our topic. This is a topic I guess I first encountered as a college student, but I didn't really think too much about it until I started covering race, ethnicity, and culture as a reporter for NPR's Code Switch team, reporting team that focuses on issues about communities of color. And when I first came across this term, I thought, what exactly is this? And did some research about it, read about it. And when you read about some of the comments, or some of the comments that people put out that use as examples of microaggressions, when I read them, it immediately hit me, I know what this is. I've never heard of microaggressions before, but I've certainly been in these situations. Situations like you heard earlier when you're asked, where are you from? And that might be the second, or sometimes the first question that's asked of you when you meet someone new. Or you hear a comment that says, you speak English so well. And all these things seem innocuous, can be very interpreted as neutral. But I've been in situations where I've gotten those questions, received those comments, and I just kind of instinctually, my kind of hairs in the back of my neck stand up, and I don't know how to take it. And I feel uncomfortable, and I feel a little offended. Why is that? Where does that come from? You know, on the face of it, these are very neutral, very basic, kind of common courtesy questions. Or if you've been in a situation where you are mistaken for another person of the same race in a small group, in a social event, or company setting. So these are all situations that I've encountered as an Asian American, and I've always been not sure what to do with that. Do you confront someone about that? How do you talk about that? Often it's with strangers. Often it's people who are in positions of authority, people you don't know very well. You can't pull everyone aside and say, hey, let's talk about that. Let's have a therapy session. And so that's a question I have today. And we're going to look at some other questions about what are other types of microaggressions, and also how have some of these panelists, how they dealt with this topic in their lives. And so we're going to start with an expert. So let's figure out if, again, you're not very familiar with this term. His name is Kevin Nadal, and he has done a lot of research about microaggressions and written books about how they impact people of color as well as LGBTQ people. And he is the Associate Professor of Psychology at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And he's also the president of the Asian American Psychological Association. So, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. What? Good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so happy to see the full house. This is amazing, which is an amazing thing because we're all here together to talk about our experiences. But like what Joanne was saying, that means probably the microaggressions mean something to us, which might not necessarily be the best thing because it means we've experienced them and perhaps they've had some negative impact on our lives. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of the whole construct of microaggressions, some of the research that's been done on microaggressions over the past 10 years, particularly with Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. We'll talk a little bit about the impact of microaggressions, how people cope with them, what are some of the potential psychological impacts, how it might affect you physically, interpersonally, practically, and then finally, I want to talk a little bit about my own personal experiences with microaggressions, perhaps as a way of describing how people might fit into the research that I'm about to describe. So first of all, just a quick show of hands, how many people here have heard of the term microaggressions before? Great, that means you saw the invite and you're here and you made it. Now prior to the invite, how many people had heard of the term before? Show of hands. Now this is fantastic. So I've been giving talks on microaggressions for about 10 years, and when I first started, I would say that maybe 10% of the room knew what microaggressions were. And now as I go to more and more places, particularly places where there are lots of young people, the numbers are majority, where most people have at least heard of the term microaggressions. And part of it might be that people have become educated on what the construct is, and therefore are having conversations and educating others about the term. And then part of it is also that people have been experiencing microaggressions their entire lives, and now they finally have a name or a word or a term to describe what it is that they're experiencing. So when we talk about microaggressions, it's important for me to pay homage to the person who created or coined the term, and that person was an American psychiatrist of the name of Chester Pierce. He was a Black American psychiatrist who wanted to talk about the subtle forms of discrimination that African Americans felt and experienced, particularly through the media. So the ways that African Americans had been portrayed, particularly in the 1970s. And he wrote a few things. He had some articles that he wrote in journals as well as in mainstream media, but it really didn't take off. And in the 70s and 80s, no one really talked about it. And perhaps one of the reasons why people didn't talk about the term microaggressions or even the concept of subtle discrimination is because during that time, there was actually a lot of overt discrimination that was happening. And so perhaps that was the priority, that we were concerned with actually being killed and murdered and assaulted and being targeted for hate crimes. And so there wasn't really a lot of research that focused on that term. In the 90s, there was a professor by the name of Daniel Solorzano who started to look at microaggressions on college campuses. And he particularly looked at African American and Latino students and some of the issues that they might face on campus, especially related to people isolating them, stereotyping as if they don't belong. And so he's really the second person that started writing about microaggressions. But again, nothing really took off. That he wrote about this in the 1990s, in the early 2000s, but it didn't really take off as a concept. And then again, perhaps there were other things for us to worry about. When we think about the 90s, there were issues related to race. We saw in the media things like the Rodney King trials and the O.J. Simpson trials. And so perhaps we weren't ready to talk about subtle discrimination yet, that it was still a lot of overt discrimination that people were experiencing in their lives, and therefore people didn't know how to talk about subtle discrimination. In 2005, 2006, a professor at Columbia University, Chinese American and Asian American man, Daryl Wing Su, who's often referred to as the father of multicultural psychology, he started writing about microaggressions. So he took some of Pierce's work, he took some of Solorzano's work, and he started applying it to what was happening in our world today. When you think about that time, 2005, 2006, this is when we were going through war, we were going through the President Bush era. You could sigh collectively, like, oh, I can't remember that. And then we started to see that perhaps we had still overt discrimination and racism particularly, but now we're starting to see subtle things. In 2007, this young man or youngish man appeared on the scene by the name of Barack Obama. He was a senator in Illinois. And now we started to have this more national conversation about subtle forms of discrimination. And so Daryl Wing Su and his research team, which I was honored to be part of, we started to really discuss what were the subtle things that we experienced that we could not necessarily attribute 100% to being about race, where sometimes when we experienced or encountered such things, it might be difficult to tell the person, hey, that was racist. It might be difficult to say, well, I know for sure it was about race, because sometimes they're so subtle, they're so innocuous, they're so quick, where you think to yourself, did that really just happen? Did they really just say that to me? Did he really just act in that way towards me? Did they really just ask me where I'm from? And when someone asks you where you're from, we don't know 100%, are they asking us where are we from because they presume we're not from this country. They genuinely might be asking us, where are they from? They might be well-intentioned. Maybe they are asking us what country we're from originally, assuming we're not from the US, but maybe it's not overtly racist. And so these are the types of things that we started to study. And so we started to look at the types of microaggressions that people experience, and we focused specifically on racial microaggressions and looking at different groups of people, including African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and multiracial people. So what are some of the microaggressions that you might experience as being part of these various groups? The Native Americans and indigenous people as well. What are some of these microaggressions that people might experience? And what we found through a lot of qualitative focus groups, which we started with, were that people were coming up with the same themes. And across all groups, the themes were similar, but they might be nuanced or they might look a little bit differently. So for example, with the African American focus groups, people were talking a lot about being stereotyped as being inferior in some way, so whether intellectually inferior or being inferior based on education or socioeconomic status. They talked about being assumed to be a criminal a lot of the times, where people were afraid of them, where people followed them around in stores, or maybe people crossed the street to avoid their paths. With Latino people, they talked a lot about being presumed to be perpetual foreigners. They talked about people commenting on their English or their accents. They talked about people referring to them as immigrants of some sort. And with Asian Americans, we saw similar things as well. So with our focus groups on Asian Americans, and these are some of the more exploratory studies, we found that there are very common themes across Asian Americans. Now, when I talk about Asian Americans as a group, we know that the Asian American racial group comprises of over 40 distinct ethnic groups. And so some of these things are generalized that a lot of people of the Asian American identity or experience might encounter in their lives. But we also know that there might be different nuances even within the group of how that might look ethnically, what that would look like for an East Asian American versus a South Asian versus a Filipino American versus a Southeast Asian versus a Pacific Islander, who aren't under the umbrella necessarily, but are oftentimes lumped with our group. So one of the first things I've heard as an example is this assumption of a perpetual foreignness, oftentimes also called being an alien in your own land. So many of us were born and raised in this country. Many of us have been in this country for generations, but yet when people first meet you, they might presume that you're not American. So they might say things to you like, where are you from? And you know what they're really asking. And you know this because this is not the first time this has been asked to you in a random context. When you're sitting at a bar or a restaurant, if someone comes up to you and the very first thing they say to you is, "Where are you from?" why do they need to do that? Why can't you say, "Hello"? Why can't you say, "How are you doing today? How was your night?" But the first thing they ask you is, "Where are you from?" So that sends a message that their intention is that they needed to know what your racial or ethnic background is. Now, some people might be a little bit more forgiving and say, "Oh, well, maybe they're just asking." So I'm going to answer the question. "So where are you from?" And the person might say, "I'm from New York." "No, where are you really from?" "Oh, I'm from Queens." "No, where are you really from?" "Oh, Jackson Heights." "No, where are you really from?" "I'm not giving you my address." So when we talk about microaggressions, we have to see that it's not so cut and dry, that we don't know for sure that the person is intentionally trying to offend us or be racist or be hurtful, that maybe they genuinely want to know what our ethnic background is and they don't have the language to ask us that. Maybe they don't realize that they have what we call implicit bias, which is that they're asking us something with the intention of being inquisitive, well-intentioned, trying to get to know us, but not knowing that when that is the first question that they ask us, that it might show that maybe they have biases towards us that they're not even connecting to psychologically or cognitively. But maybe it's not as cut and dry because they're not saying these racial slurs to us as maybe was more common 10, 20 years ago. And so it's a more subtle form of discrimination. And because it's so subtle, when you experience it, you might not know how to act. You might not know whether you're allowed to say, "Hey, you're racist." You might not know if you're allowed to complain about it because maybe it's so small, it's not even a big deal. Why would I even tell anyone about it? But maybe it does affect you. And maybe if it happens to you all of your life, several times a week, as apparently people have mentioned, and I know to be true as well, that is like a little poke on you each time. Not like in the Facebook poke, like, "Hey," but like a little like ouch. Like each time that happens, you say, "Ouch." But the accumulation of ouches perhaps might lead for you to feel bad or angry or sad or frustrated. Why does this always have to happen? And why does this not happen to other people? And if you try to tell this to people who aren't of Asian American identity or experience, probably they'll say, "Well, it's not a big deal." But maybe they say that because they've never experienced it in the way that you have. This isn't a common stressor in their life. And so this is what we're talking about, microaggressions, the balancing of understanding that some things you might feel to be hurtful and discriminatory, but now people can't even validate you on that because they might not have that experience, or they might think that you are exaggerating or overreacting to something that is very true in your life. So the first example that I gave is this idea of being assumed to be a perpetual foreigner. The second type of microaggression that's very common for Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other people of color as well, is this idea of exoticization. So when people exoticize you, particularly because of your racial background, your cultural background. Sometimes exoticization is related to sexualization. So when women, Asian American women, are hit on by men, and it doesn't have to be white men necessarily, it can be other men of color, other people who are non-Asian, and they say things like, "Wow, I really like Asian women." And that's supposed to be a compliment. But what does that mean? Perhaps you're saying that you're only viewing me as attractive because of I'm a trophy wife. I'm the stereotype that you saw in the media. I'm Madame Butterfly or Miss Saigon or whatever you saw. I am somebody that's going to please you, to serve you, to be inferior to you, and that's maybe something that you see. And it's all about wording. Somebody says you're beautiful. Maybe that feels okay. It's not being racialized when somebody says that. But when somebody says, "Wow, you are so exotic," Perhaps their message that they're sending to you is that they think you're beautiful, but they think you're like a different kind of beautiful, not like the type of beautiful they're used to. And so that can feel really dehumanizing or objectifying or make you feel like they're only attracted to you because of your race. Another common microaggression for Asian Americans is the assumption of the model minority myth. So when people presume that because you're Asian American, you would fit certain criteria or symptoms or behaviors of model minorities and how they define it. So for example, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, Kevin, can you help me fix my computer?" And then I look at them and say, "I'm a psychologist. I can ask how your computer feels, maybe." But why do they do that? Why do they presume that because you're Asian, you would be good at math or science or computers? Why do people say that because you're Asian, that you would ruin a curve in your college class, or that you would be presumed to not be a social person, or whatever number of stereotypes people have as a result of this? So what microaggressions do is that the accumulation of these experiences, of these encounters, that they hurt. And sometimes some microaggressions hurt more than others. Sometimes some microaggressions feel really daunting and overbearing, and it feels like you can't move and you don't know what to do in those moments. And sometimes microaggressions are those ouch moments, where you're like, ouch, and maybe you don't think about it for the rest of the day. But again, just like with a physical hurt or wound that you might have, if somebody wounded you each time, even if it was just a small little poke, and that happened all the time in your life, maybe that would then have a cumulative effect on you. What some of the research is finding is that microaggressions are related to several health outcomes and disparities. So people who experience more microaggressions are also more likely to report more symptoms of depression, more symptoms of physical health problems, a lower self-esteem, more binge drinking episodes, more likeliness or higher likeliness to have an eating disorder. And so we see that people who experience microaggressions, that because perhaps we're not dealing with them, we don't talk about them because we view them as so small or minuscule, that it's affecting us in ways that we don't even necessarily know how. Now, there are ways to cope with microaggressions, and I know I'm running out of time. But there are ways to cope, and when I share these coping mechanisms, I emphasize that there isn't a right way to cope with microaggressions, because there are going to be so many different situations and different factors that take into account, or need to be taken into account when you experience microaggressions. Sometimes maybe you want to laugh at a microaggression. Maybe you want to make a joke to them because it's so ridiculous that you experience this microaggression, so maybe that's the only thing you need to do. And maybe humor is a great coping mechanism a lot of time, but when you use humor only as your coping mechanism, maybe that's something to examine. Why am I only going to humor instead of going to other places? Sometimes you want to get angry. And being angry when a microaggression occurs is natural. That's a human feeling to experience anger. But maybe anger might not be the best in a lot of situations, particularly if it might affect your job, your grade from your professor, your working environment, that maybe you don't want to go to anger. Sometimes assertiveness is said to be the best way to deal with problems, and I think that's true in a lot of cases, but sometimes you don't want to be assertive. Sometimes you're exhausted. You don't want to address something that just happened because it's exhausting to talk about it. To have to stop each person that microaggresses towards you can be something that can be psychologically just taxing, and maybe you don't want to have to do that each time. But what I find to be very helpful with coping is, regardless of how you react in the moment, is that you make sure that you talk to people about it, that you just don't internalize what a microaggression is, because perhaps this is why it then has these long-term effects. So I'm just going to share one example of microaggressions, how it affects my life, hopefully to just bring it all home, bring it all together. But I think one thing is just the accumulation of having microaggressions and people invalidating you. This is one I didn't talk about. But every time you say that you experience a microaggression, it might lead to another microaggression of invalidation. So you tell somebody like, oh, I had a really rough day at work, everyone was treating me weirdly, they presumed I didn't speak English, or they presumed I wasn't smart enough, or they presumed that I wasn't a leader enough, or they just excluded me out of the conversation altogether. So this is something that I experience in my life. What I find is that the higher I get in my career, the less people look like me, and particularly in areas of leadership and so forth. And so it's easy to just continue on with your day and pretend that that doesn't happen. But it's really important for me to talk to people about it, to find peers and support networks, people especially who can understand what you're going through. Sometimes you might not find someone who knows exactly what you're going through, but maybe they know a little bit of what you're going through. Sometimes you'll find someone who doesn't know what you're going through at all and will tell you that you're wrong. You'll post a Facebook status and they'll write like, nah, it's all in your head. And then you press that beautiful defriend button. It's so amazing. But it's so important for people to talk about these things because I truly believe that microaggressions are just part of the world that we live in as a result of systemic racism and sexism and homophobia and all these other forms of discrimination. But I do believe that we can do something about them. And one is for us to cope with them, to talk about them, to make sure that we're not letting them get to us, but also that we are able to educate others on what microaggressions are. Inevitably, anytime I give a talk, somebody will still raise their hand and say something like, well, maybe it's just all in your head and you're just being insensitive and I don't want to live in a world where I have to be PC all the time. And I say to that person, I say, you know what, you don't have to be PC. But if you want to continue to behave and say things in ways that you know are hurting people, that you know are related to things like health disparities and mental health disparities, and you continue to do that, I'm not telling you to be PC, but I'm telling you to care about people. And so what I hope you all could do is to take that message to tell folks that microaggressions are real, they exist, but what can we do to make the world a better place? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. It's really interesting, the studies you were citing about just the health effects there. So the next speaker we're going to hear from is a student. We heard from a professor at an education level, at a school level, sorry. Can you guys hear me in the back now? Let me stand up so you can see me too. The next speaker we're going to hear from, she is a student, a sophomore at excuse me. Scroll. Here we go. She's a sophomore at New York Institute of Technology, and she's studying biology, wants to be a doctor. And it'll be interesting to hear from her experiences as a student, currently at a school. Maybe some of you are also students. Her kind of daily experiences. She also has some really interesting experience as a member of the Junior Sikh Coalition, which she's been a member for the past 3 years. If you've never heard of the Junior Sikh Coalition, it develops young Sikh leaders through different workshops and programming. She also volunteers at the New York Hospital of Queens, and her name is Almeet Kaur.
I'll just stand here. Hi, everyone. My name is Almeet Kaur. This is actually the first time I'm doing a panel, so. All right. So I'd like to thank Kevin, first of all, for a great base on what microaggressions actually are. And it's really great seeing that there are so many faces out here that, actually care about what's going on, like just want to know about what it actually is. So I'd like to actually start off with a personal story. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So I'd actually like to start off with a personal story. So I'm a sophomore in college now. But I can clearly remember when I was in the 4th grade, my parents used to leave me and my sister into this after-school program because, as we know, immigrant parents have to work a little bit harder. We have to go to that extra mile to provide food for us, for our children, and just make sure that we have stuff saved up on the side because we have to put in that extra mile. We don't have anyone behind us who is there to, back us up or anything. So my parents often had to put me in an after-school program so that I can stay there, and they can work, and then they can pick me up afterwards. So my sister would be here with me, and she was in kindergarten, I was in the 4th grade. And I remember one day she came up to me and she said, Didi means sister. Didi, I don't have any friends. I don't know where to go. So I was like, all right, let me walk around with you, see if I can find someone your age, and let's see if we can find you a friend. So I was walking around and I see these girls who were in her class. They were playing kickball. So I was like, oh, perfect. You can just go join them. So I was like, all right, go say hi, make a friend, right? That's how you're gonna get on. So she goes, and I see that they've kind of formed a circle against her. Like she's kind of in the back, and she feels unwelcome. So I see this, and she sees that I see this. So she comes up to me and she goes, Didi, I don't know how to do this. So I said, all right, I'll help you out. So I approach one of these little girls. She's a kindergartner. And I say, hey, would you like to play with my sister? She's also in your class. You guys probably have the same teachers and everything. And she goes, oh, my mom told me to not play with people like you. People like you. Like, let that sink in. I was a 4th grader at the time, and I heard it, and I was like, whoa, people like you. And like being a 4th grader, you don't really think about these things. You're just, living life. You're going to school, coming back, and when you hear those words, it stings. So that was my first encounter with a microaggression. And although my situation wasn't as difficult as other situations can be, it still goes to show how much a microaggression can actually stay with you. That one incident I can still remember while I'm a sophomore in college. Now, there are many other situations out there that can actually get worse, and I'm going to share a friend's story with you. So there was a Muslim boy and a Sikh boy. They were both best friends. This Muslim boy had just immigrated from Pakistan with his parents. He was trying to find friends at school, so this Sikh boy and Muslim boy were best friends. Now, post 9/11, this Muslim boy was obviously facing a lot of, racial slurs that students were just throwing at him, making sly remarks, comments, and people tend to, just kind of fly by it, whatever, it's fine, it's something that everyone faces, but when you face it over and over again, when you face it 5 days a week, Monday to Friday at school, at this place where you're all alone, you're not with your parents, this is the first time you're in this country, it hurts, right? It's difficult to take that in. So when this kid started facing all of these rude, sly comments, he began to assimilate himself with a culture that he had just gotten thrown into. He started to forget himself, forget who he was, and become one of the people who were obviously throwing these racial slurs at him. And so when the kid started seeing that he was assimilating, he wasn't really relating himself to his past, all the attention went on the Sikh boy, his best friend. And they started throwing racial slurs at him. He was the next target of the school, and basically it ended up in a very violent fight in which the Muslim boy didn't stand up for his friend. He didn't stand up for the best friend who was there for him when he was new. He took the side of the people who were throwing these racial slurs at him and were, just being violent towards him. So when we look at microaggressions, they're obviously more apparent at a larger scale, right? But even microaggressions that happen at a smaller scale have the same amount of detrimental effects on a kid. So for example, as Kevin mentioned earlier, all these examples, you're Asian, you should be smarter than that. When we're exposed to these things, we don't want to express ourselves. We want to kind of live up to those and be like, oh my God, like we're going to be judged if we are, say, not as smart as an Asian should be, quote unquote. So going back to my story, microaggressions can actually cause cuts that are a little deeper than what an actual bullying situation may look like, right? So I internalized that word that she said. This kindergartner told me, people like you. I was like, who am I then? I had been going to this school for like 5 years, and all of a sudden I was like, who am I? Like, where is my home? Where do I belong? So growing up, I'm a first generation, and I'm the oldest of 2 kids. Well, you know, my sister. So I had 2 basic responsibilities, and I still have those because I'm still growing up, right? But one responsibility was to be a role model for my sister. My parents always told me, you know, whatever you do, your sister's gonna follow in your footsteps. Whatever you say, whatever you think, wherever you go, whatever kind of friends you make, your sister's gonna follow in your footsteps. So be sure to do the right thing. And imagine like a little girl growing up with this. I mean, now it's okay because now I'm a little older, but a little girl growing up with this who doesn't really know who she is, right? Like how am I supposed to have my identity straight and then have it straight for my sister so that she can grow up to be a great person too? So I had the weight of 2 kids on my back. And the second responsibility was to be equally in touch with both of my cultures. I was expected from my community, my multiple communities that I was a part of, to be equally in touch with my Punjabi traditions, with my Sikh culture and religion, and also with the American culture Like I was expected to know, you know, what the newest songs were or what the newest movie was. I was supposed to watch it, and then in my Punjabi culture, I was supposed to know exactly how to say everything. Like I was supposed to know the language fluently. And often, if you lean towards one side a little more than the other communities would come at you. They'd be like, oh, you know, you're forgetting your roots. Or, oh, like now you're here, you're supposed to know these things. So it's a thin line to walk. And when you're trying to find yourself among all of this, and then you're getting all this backlash from your communities, it's hard not to just assimilate into everything, right? So I'd like to bring up just the idea of model minority and perpetual foreigner, as Kevin had mentioned earlier. So a model minority is basically those who have made it in life, right? So often, as an Asian American, I was expected, oh, you know, you guys are Asian, you guys are already smart enough for this, you're supposed to know this. So when I did need help, this is personally, I'm speaking, when I did need help, I was often afraid to go to these extra help classes. I was like, wait, you know, what if someone judges me? They're gonna be like, oh, you don't even belong here, like you already know this. No, I don't know this, you know? And there's no room for like just expressing yourself. There's no room for you to for anyone else to appreciate the diversity that exists within our Asian American community because of these minor comments that become microaggressions. And then a perpetual foreigner is where they impair your sense of belonging. You're not truly an American. So when I heard the words people like you, that's when it hit me, because you know I'd been saying the Pledge of Allegiance since I was in kindergarten. I was born and raised in America. The July 4th, Labor Day, Memorial Day, you know, the whole thing. Like I was an American, but then when I heard those words, I was like, wait, am I really an American? So when you take all of that into one big bucket, right? You kind of start to think, okay, so which community do I belong to? And now, Sangat is a very important Sikh term that means community, but it also has another deeper meaning. And my mom always used to tell me, you know, you can use your Sangat to bring you back to where you belong. So I set out to find my Sangat, and I found that I was part of multiple communities, right? I was part of the Sikh community, I was part of the American community, the Punjabi community, a heterosexual community. I was part of communities that supported other causes. And often, when you're part of so many other communities, they tend to clash. And then you don't really know, you know, where you belong. So basically, when you're trying to just, you know, find yourself, find find where you fall into in all of these communities. Um, it's difficult to make that distinction when you're facing backlash. So I was looking for a long time. I was looking for that backbone, that identity that I can relate to, and I finally came across the Junior Sikh Coalition. The Junior Sikh Coalition is basically a leadership development program that trains Sikh youth into becoming leaders and into leading workshops that can encourage other Sikh youth to, stand up for themselves, to face bullying in a way where they don't have to deny their self-expression. They can still express themselves and they can still go on to be who they are without giving up their diversity, without giving up their religion. So our anti-bullying workshops often, we talk about what bullying is, but we also make it known to these kids of what microaggressions are. So when you face it, you know what it is. You know what these sly comments are. You know how much they're going to affect you in such a way. So basically, microaggressions suppress minorities through stereotypes, whether it be in our community, between our communities, or from different communities just coming at you. So when you put this all together, as an Asian American community, we have so much diversity. We have the enriched past that our parents bring along with them to this country, and then we have the opportunities that are available to us in this country. So we can use all of those, and we can use all of those along with our self-expression to power ourselves in so many different areas. So when we let these microaggressions kind of bring us down, we're also preventing the world from finding out what we can actually bring to this world, right? What an Asian American can put out. We don't have to assimilate. We can coexist with all of these different people, with all of these different opportunities, with all of these different communities, right? So that's often a problem that youth face, assimilation versus coexisting. So if I were to say one thing to my 4th grade self, that would be that when you hear the words people like you, there is no one else like you. You're the only one here who represents you, right? You're the only one who represents all the multiple communities that you belong to. There's no one else who belongs to all of those communities that you do. So when you hear those words, people like you, that should only power you to coexist even more. You shouldn't assimilate. You shouldn't try to be like everyone else. Just own those communities, own who you are, and coexist with them. And that's all.
That's a really good suggestion to flip it on its head. People like you define what that is, and it sounds like what Almi did is what Kevin suggested, which is to find communities, find ways to talk about these situations that you encounter, and to not hold it in, to find people who are supportive, could be like-minded, to kind of help you figure out how to process it. Our next speaker did a different kind of way of finding a community, find a way of processing it. He helped started a Tumblr. This was right after he graduated from Columbia University. He's currently a researcher at a neuroscience lab in Boston, so he traveled from Boston to be with us tonight. But this Tumblr, it ultimately became what is now known as the Microaggressions Project, and you may have read about it in the New York Times, BuzzFeed, some other articles about it. And I hope I'm summarizing this correctly. Basically, it takes reader submissions of just encounters you've had. Some people post, somebody said this to me, or describes the situation. And it was one of the first times that all of these different experiences, all these different microaggressions that people experience were compiled together into one Tumblr, to one area, and shown and kind of shared pretty widely across social media. His name is David Zhou, and he is our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Almeid, for your wonderful personal story, and I hope it it sheds some light into kind of like how we bring this work forward from our childhoods into our adult lives. And Kevin, you set the precedent for standing, so now I have to do it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So thanks, Hansi, for the introduction. So I helped found a website called the Microaggressions Project. It's also at microaggressions.com. If you want to check it out. I founded it with a close friend of mine and colleague from college. Her name is Vivian Liu. She couldn't be here, but in college we worked on a lot of student organizing activities. Around communities of color. How students of color sort of can make demands of the university, etc. In college, and something that we've always had to do in college was justify our activities, right, to people who are not in our community. And this process, really involves people asking what you're doing, why you're doing it, kind of these questions about what is going on and where you're from, right? And I think it's not an accident that the two of us have also had these very marginalized experiences growing up. Vivian, she grew up in Boulder, Colorado, where her family was one of the only Asian families, if not the only Asian family in the city. And I grew up here in New York, but I went to high school on the Upper West Side at a school that was predominantly white and almost entirely wealthy. So there were these different sort of axes of marginalization going on. And so when we came to college, we really looked for ways to sort of examine these issues and work on them. And just like any college experience, for those of you who might be in college, any conversation about, for example, like the number of Asian students at a school, or listening to some like comedy groups, racist jokes on campus, they eventually settle on these questions of what are they doing, and why is it so hard to talk about what they're doing wrong. So my friend Vivian, she told me about the word microaggressions in 2007. Kevin, I don't know, were you at Columbia at that time? Yeah. So there was obviously some awareness brewing about this term, especially in our community that was already somewhat sort of political because we were doing organizing, and by the time we graduated in 2010, we were like, this is too real for us. We have to do something about this. We have to tell our own stories. And Joanne, it's so funny that is Joanne back there? It's so funny that she was like, I'll start a blog and put all this online, because this was our original idea. We were going to create a blog, and it was going to be a timeline of just these events in our in our childhoods up to the current day that have shaped who we are and shaped how we see the world. And we started doing this, but eventually we believed that we had to extend our ideas, not just to race and gender, the identities that we faced, but we also had to extend these to other people, and let people sort of submit their own stories, and that's how the project began. So I actually printed out some submissions that I want to read. in full. Okay, and these submissions they are mostly from Asian Americans, and they really sort of happen in all different social settings, professional settings, and educational settings. So here's one of them. It goes, I'm an Asian American student, and when I'm in class at the beginning of the year, teachers would generally ask me if I understood basic words. Sometimes this happens several times throughout the year when I've had the same teacher every other day, right? Yeah. So here's another story. The older white man next to me on my flight asks me what I'm reading. It turns out we work in similar fields. We talk and exchange business cards. As we leave the flight, he tells me, a biracial Asian white woman in my 30s, that I should wear Hello Kitty outfits. I ask him what he means, and he tells me that his colleague's wife, who is Korean, loves Hello Kitty. It made me feel dirty, angry, confused, fetishized, and infantilized. And yeah, I have more to read, but I'm just going to read one more. Okay. Okay, and here's the last one. I'm chatting on Facebook with a romantic interest. I'm an Asian American gay male, 22. He's an white American gay male, 23. Everything's going fine until he says that he prefers dating Asian men because he doesn't like, quote, manly men. While I don't identify as manly, I feel angry and hurt that he felt it was okay to casually generalize about and define a whole group of people for them. Later, he repeatedly refers to an ex as his, quote, Chinese boyfriend, rather than by any other feature or by the person's name. I am of Chinese descent. His language makes me feel interchangeable, collectible, and fetishized. Yeah, so it's not hard to see how these interactions can affect your psychology in very practical terms. Like Kevin and Almid have said, it happens when you start to believe that your achievements are not your own, when you're told that you don't belong in somewhere that you are, or that your worth is tied to your racial, gender, or sexual identity. And these are very subtle ways that people of color, women, and queer people are sort of dehumanized in sort of very ordinary, everyday settings. So I've been working on this project for 5 years, and we've published several thousand stories like this. And in all of the stories, we ask where this happened and what it made them feel, right? And there are some kind of takeaways that I've taken away. So the first of them is just talking about these experiences has a very deep impact, and being able to talk about them, being able to name them and put a finger on them, makes people feel that their experiences are real and not imaginary. And this is, like Kevin said, this is a really great way to deal with these experiences, and it's psychologically quite healthy. So another thing that I've learned is that we can fail to address the topic adequately when we don't connect these sort of everyday interpersonal interactions with the larger systemic, institutional sort of interactions that people face. For example, if you if you see people talking in the news, right, about things that are systemic now, right, like the Black Lives movement, police killings of unarmed black men, things like that matter because people people on the sort of everyday level somehow think that they don't, right? Um, and systemic sort of injustices persist because people on the everyday level don't think that they need to be addressed. So the micro and the I like to say macro are linked, and you can't really take them apart. Kevin, I thought it was really interesting. You said, in the past when people have brought up this term, right? We've been dealing with so many things, and doing this work, I've also realized that when people have brought up this term in the past, the word microaggressions, sometimes haven't been used. People in literature have brought up sort of interpersonal interactions that they've had as far back as like hundreds of years ago. But yeah, I forgot what I was saying there. Anyway, so I want to just kind of end with how this has changed how I go about my own life. I work in science, and in science, sometimes there's not always the opportunity to talk about social issues, but I've also been able to sort of notice how microaggressions and these interactions cause people to be excluded, right? Without a word having to be said. So I work in a field where people do a lot of computer science and programming, and I noticed that whenever my coworkers start to talk about something like computer programming, they will stop addressing and making eye contact with the women in the room, right? And and you can imagine how this makes a difference, right? This determines who gets put on certain projects. This determines who becomes further trained in the field, and if you're a guy, you probably don't know this, right? You probably don't notice this. But if you're a woman, it's the kind of like daily reinforcement that that makes you feel that you don't belong in a certain place. In my own life, I've tried to try to notice it when it happens, and I've tried to sort of do things subtly to bring people back in, to include people again, yeah, so I want to end with some things that I think might be helpful to deal with microaggressions. One of the editors on our staff, she develops these training materials for Teach for America, and she said something that was really helpful. And this was also very similar to what Kevin said. It's never the onus of the victim or even of bystanders to address microaggressions, but it's important that you are able to move forward with power and be able to protect yourself in the process. But if you're able to address them, something that's really useful is to stop them while they're happening. So, for example, if you stop them and say, what did you just say? Or if you say like, ouch, or say like, whoa, that's not okay. Something that's also really important is to talk about the whatever kind of event that happens. Even if you don't have a full handle on it yourself, being able to talk about it allows you to feel that it's not invisible, it's not imaginary, and even if you don't talk about it with the person who created the interaction, something that something that I think is clever is gossip is actually a good thing for microaggressions because and no, it really is because gossip does two things, right? One is you're able to talk about it with someone, and two is it helps reinforce community norms, right? It helps the community know that things are not okay, right? And it helps hopefully it's the kind of information that will travel back to the person who created the interaction. And that's it. Yep.
Thank you, David. Our last speaker, I met through, we went to the same college at different times, Swarthmore College. And after she graduated, she's done a lot of things, including being very involved in Asian American politics. She spent 7 years in the Asian American Pacific Islander National Politics, was the former president and CEO at the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. They're a very big group in DC. And she also served as executive director of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus under Congressman Mike Honda. Here in New York, while she was still a student, a college student, she started a group you may know of called Chinatown Youth Initiatives. And that's a group that's still going on strong. But what's more related to tonight's discussion is that she is currently the founder of Coach Diversity Institute, which works with lots of different people, including from students to senior White House advisors, training them and coaching them through different difficulties, challenges they're going through in life. And her name is Gloria Chan.
Thank you, Hansi. Ooh. How are you guys doing? It's been kind of like a heavy conversation, right? So how many of you guys have some tension in your bodies somewhere? Okay, I want everyone to kind of just stand up and just reach to the sky and just kind of like bend as you will. Just express yourself however your body wants to like move in the space that you have. Just go ahead and do that. And just feel your feet grounded on the floor. We're present in this room. I invite you to take a long, deep breath, belly out. And release. And again, belly out. Do it. And this time, breathe into any area of your body that is holding some tension, okay? Go ahead and breathe right into that spot. Do it again. Exhale. Close your eyes this time. No one is in this room but you. Breathe it in. Again, keep your eyes closed. Breathe right into that tension. And in this last breath, just breathe love within your body and throughout everyone else in this room. Just go ahead and do that. Exhale, breathe that love out. When you're ready, just open your eyes and sit down. Okay, whew, I feel better. I've been like sitting here, like absorbing all of this microaggression in my body, and I'm like, I have to get out, people. Please, let me do something here. So when I was in college, I was all like power to the people, right? I was like Asian American power, you know. I grew up in New York City, and most of my facilitation and leadership learning happened in rooms with lots of brown people, right? Black folks, Latinos. Usually I may have been the only one. Me and my sister, or one other Asian. That was it. So this audience is awesome, 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 awesome. And like our panelists, I had a lot of different communities and axes through which my identity was developed. And a lot of times I felt like some kind of outsider. And it just really pissed me off, like a lot. And so I was at a comedy club, and I was so happy to learn that Kevin was a comedian. That just made me warm and fuzzy inside. But when I was in college, I was at a comedy club, and there was an African American comic who started making some jokes. And they were kind of funny. They were funny, right? They were funny. Until he started talking about this Chinese restaurant and how they, on the sly, would slaughter cats in the alley and sneak it into your plate. And that somehow was funny, and I got pissed because that's where I was at, right? And so during an intermission at the show, I went up to this black comic and blah, 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 and I said, hey, dogs, that's what we eat in the restaurant, dogs. And he comes up to me, he says, that wasn't me. That was the other black comic. And I said, oh snap, what did I do? I'm just gonna leave, I'm so sorry. I was like, I didn't even say sorry. I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna turn around and go. I was so embarrassed. But sometimes, you know, like the panelists said, sometimes this SHIT is really funny, right? That when the White House story with the people walking through saying, where are you from? That I was kind of laughing at that. And sometimes we laugh because we've elevated and it's funny. Sometimes we laugh to cope. But at the end of the day, what we need to do as a community, if we truly care about creating a new world where racism and racial discrimination and racial identity and power and privilege as we know it no longer exists, if we are able to rise above that, that is where our true power lies. That is where our true power lies, right? So far we've been talking about where microaggressions come from, right? Centuries of thinking and thought that have created systems where people do not matter all the same way. Does that make sense? So we've been talking about the past, the history of it, the current reality of it. We've been talking about coping with it, laughing it off, and now I want to talk about moving forward and creation, right? And creating a world where we don't have to sit in this room anymore. It's all about what Almeet was talking about, self-expression, and just being able to express ourselves without any expectation or pressure or any outside jabs coming in at us. So where we can be at a space where we're strong enough to do that. So that's what I want to offer tonight. So first, the most important thing where we want to start is to validate ourselves and our own emotions and own experiences. The very first thing that I want to say is that there's no such thing as an overreaction. Got that? There's no such thing as an overreaction, and here's why. We react to our life experiences based on how we perceive the world. And how we perceive the world, the way that we do that, is based on every single thing that has ever happened to not only us, but our entire families and all of our communities and anything that you've learned in ethnic studies, right? Which is like all of a sudden, everything is on us, right? So based on all of our education, past experiences, family history, we are perceiving that one moment where it's called a microaggression. And it might seem to an objective outsider to be an overreaction, but first, it's not an overreaction. So give yourself the way to move beyond racism, and start creating a new world where we are love and all upon each other, right? And that's it, is to just validate our feelings, validate our experiences, and just create the space to air it out. So when I did the breathing thing just now, that is so important, because just like our panelist says, if we leave it in there, if we don't talk about it, if we don't tell the stories, if we don't do the work with other young people, if we don't teach about it, it stays in our bodies and it becomes cancer, or it becomes depression, or it becomes alcoholism, or it becomes other addictions, or worse, right? Suicide. We're talking about really serious stuff. So air it out so it doesn't stay in your body. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I want to say is, just after you've aired it out, you're good, you've cleared the space, ask yourself, what do I really want to do about it now? What do I really want now? And so I was asked to talk on this panel because I do a lot of coaching for recent graduates, for young professionals, for executives, for basically everyone, legacy building, wherever you are on your career cycle. I've done a lot of coaching. So the questions that we use with coaching, or what we do with coaching, is we create the space to actually ask, where do we want to go from here? Which is incredibly important. So I want to give you a couple of examples so you get a sense of what this means. So I was coaching a client, and she does Asian American issues internally for a national organization, and also as head of like outreach. So anything Asian American and Pacific Islander, she handles. And so she was ready to put together this huge presentation. She was like real jazzed about it. And you know how we do in, women and people of color preparing in mainstream organizations, we over prepare, right? You want to make sure everyone feels included. It's social justice work, so you want to make sure the process is right. You're getting the everyone's input and sharing the agenda setting. You want to get all of the research done beforehand. She's got this whole beautiful presentation prepared, slides and everything. She's worked it all out. And during the meeting that she's facilitating, it gets kind of sidetracked on some random issue that just kind of came up. And it was taking a lot of airspace. People were just going on and on and on. Next thing you know, an hour has passed and she hasn't even touched her presentation. So what's happening inside of her? She's starting to get livid. These people are disrespecting me. Like, think about the thought reel that's happening in her mind, right? These people aren't listening to me. They're disrespecting me. They don't think they're disrespecting my work. They don't care about my time. My effort is not important. I'm invisible. I'm insignificant. I don't exist. I don't matter. These things are happening like rapid time in her mind, right? And so it's like a little pimple that's like pop. It wants to pop, right? And so sooner or later, as the meeting goes, she's like, don't you guys want to hear my presentation at all? And so that jacks up her leadership mojo, right? Because all of a sudden she's this crazy Asian American lady that like blew up a little bit in the meeting. I'm exaggerating. She's also in the room, but I won't tell you who she is. So we're coaching about it. It was like, okay, what do we do if this happens again? Because sure enough, it's going to happen again. I've had plenty of other clients who have said, I've been called too quiet. I'm not leadership material. I'm not assertive enough, and all this stuff, right? So she wants to coach around it. Like, what do we do? And so the more we talked about it, we aired out the emotions. Like, clearly, this is something that's happened to you before, an experience that's resonating with you over and over and over again. That's why you interpreted it that way. It makes sense. What's another way to think about it? Or rather, why was it bothering you so much? And finally, we hit the nail on the head. It was bothering her because she didn't feel respected as a leader. That was the key thing. And it's going to be different for every single one of you. Not everyone here is going to be attached to leadership. It might be importance. It might be voice. It might be something very specific. So when you guys coach yourselves around this or work with a coach on it, you got to be really crystal clear in your own minds about what it is that you want, right? Because we're talking about what Almik was talking about before, was self-expression. If I'm going to express what's inside of myself in this very moment, I got to be crystal clear about what's pissing me off and what I really want. So at the end of the day, it was leadership. I want to be respected as a leader. So boom, $1 million question. I ask her, if you respected yourself as a leader how would you view the situation? It's like, oh, snap. You know, it was like this insight. If I respected myself as a leader, I would have stood in my power and said, hey, this issue came up that affects everyone. And I, as the facilitator, made the space for this discussion to happen. And next time this comes around, I'm going to declare that during the meeting and say, hey, this issue's come up. It's kind of derailing what I had planned for the agenda, but how do you guys feel about talking about this right now? And we'll table the rest for another time. Asserting her leadership, asserting her decision-making in that moment, and then moving forward as a powerful leader. So that's what we worked on instead. We didn't coach around, let me fix what other people are, let me change how these people are viewing me. Let me focus outward. We went inside, figured out what it was that she wanted to express, coached around that, and built up her self-concept around herself being a powerful leader. Because that's the harm when we're talking about this stuff, right? The harm is that we internalize these messages that are outside, whether they're quote unquote real or not, it doesn't matter because we are perceiving them to be real. And it's being enforced in very real ways in our lives. We're experiencing them emotionally in our bodies, we're experiencing them, right? It's like, how can we rise above it to realize the opportunity for learning and self-expression of our true selves in that moment? So that's what I want to give to you, and that's just one example. I'll give you an example that happened to me. Corky knows I was the first communications director for the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, which is the caucus of members of Congress on the Hill who work on Asian Pacific American issues. I was the first one, and I think I was probably 26 years old. You know what it is to be 26 years old. And having that first communications director title, it was kind of daunting. It was like, what am I doing here, right? I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never, besides my mother, I had never really called a reporter before. Like, I don't know what that is. And I'm working on a national stage. And really it was a training ground. You know, like my boss, Mike Honda, he trusted me. He was like, I will train you, and this is what we're going to do, and I trust you, and we're building the caucus together, and let's do this together. And I would get pissed all the time because I would see all these articles on Roll Call or The Hill or all these, DC newspaper, big shot DC newspapers, who would never freaking cover the community. And I would say, where are we? We're so invisible. You're always covering, minority communities. You say, African American, Latino, and then nothing. African American, Latino, nothing. I'm just pissed. Every day of my life, I'm pissed. This is crazy. This can't be right. And I'm maybe sending some emails out at this point. Not really doing much networking with reporters. I don't know what I'm doing, really. And so a lot of that job was also connecting with community leaders. And that I could do with my eyes closed, right? I could send out press releases to everyone in this room, all the community organizations around the country. That communication I could do pretty easy. And so finally, a couple months down the line, someone decided to mentor me and say, hey, you kind of have to do the work if you want to get stories in the paper. You kind of have to pick up the phone because journalists aren't walking around saying, I want to discriminate against Asian Americans today, and I will purposefully not put you in the paper. So finally, I learned the skills of the trade. I learned how to network. I learned how to have coffee with people that I wanted to have relationships with, and I did the work. Finally, when 2012 hit, all of a sudden, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders had over 30 candidates running for congressional office. Now that's a story, right? It's building the skills and the power within yourself to figure out what it is you want to express in your lifetime. Okay, so not only did I know the skills of the trade, But our communities were doing something worth telling, doing stories worth telling. Now that is powerful, and all of a sudden we've got national coverage from every single major outlet in 2012 covered the fact that our community was rising as a demographic voting bloc and had all these members of Congress running for office. And a lot of them won, right? So all of a sudden, we were having tremendous power, including Grace Meng in Queens, right? Yay. So all that to say is, even though we experience this stuff, I encourage you to make the space to air it out. Make the space to air it out. Make the space to process it. Make the space to let it go. Because that's how we create the space for us to be ourselves and to contribute to this world the way that we're meant to. And here's the other thing, too. If you don't make that choice, that's all good. Because that's the choice that you were meant to make, right? If you are harboring anger or frustration, you're meant to harbor that until that pimple is ready to pop, right? You don't want to prematurely, I can go down like a really long path, but I want to spare you guys what prematurely popping a pimple looks like. But so give yourself the space to do the work at your own time, but make the space and know that even though it might kind of feel crunchy right now, it might feel bad right now, that it's all for a greater purpose. That you can move, you'll be moving forward some point, someday, sometime. You'll have the support, you'll know what to do, you'll get the help, you'll go online, you'll find a psychiatrist, you'll find a psychologist, you'll find a coach, you'll work with your friends. You have so many resources on hand to move from being a victim to coping to thriving. And that's what coaching is all about. That's why I love my job. And now, as Senior Vice President at Coach Diversity Institute, I'm so excited because I feel like I'm in the middle of history here. I feel like I'm creating new worlds where racism doesn't exist anymore. I'm like loving this because sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy, but there's a recent artist that has this line in her song, "Call me crazy, but maybe I am, but someday I'm gonna fly." And that's what I feel like I'm doing. So at Coach Diversity Institute is the only institute that seeks to empower diverse communities through coaching. Coaching is helping people get from point A to point B, to full self-expression, right? We're talking about full human potential, full humanity for everyone. That's the vision. That's why I love it. And so what we do is we diversify the coaching profession by certifying people to come through the ranks and get the skills that you need to help people make this spaciousness. If you love what I'm talking about, come talk to me afterwards. We'd love to get you through our programs. It also means working with organizations to help build capacity, like at Empire Blue Cross, to help not only the staff within, but also your clients outside, your communities, to help them follow their full potentials and build human capacity to change our world for the better. We also provide thought leadership because sadly enough, we're still at the beginning stages of the conversation, right? This is the very first time that I've brought coaching to a Microaggressions panel. I am so thankful to be a part of it. But I will stop there and would love to answer any questions along with my esteemed panel here. So thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. We're getting close to dinner, but I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to this pimple analogy. When you're ready to pop this pimple, and maybe internally you figured it out, and this is a question for everyone here, and you're ready to maybe have a conversation with someone who has said something that you feel that is a microaggression, that you took, just didn't sit right with you, and you're ready to process it with this person. Maybe it's someone who is your boss, maybe someone who's your professor, it could be a friend, could be a stranger. What is some language that any of you have used personally that has worked, that has been effective? Because you can't start screaming at someone, you can't be totally raw. You want to communicate a message, what are some words, what's some wording, some phrasing that has worked in certainly different contexts, different things, but Gloria?
The first thing I would say is that you don't have to address the perpetrator every time. Like Hansi said, you know, sometimes it might be people that you deal with on a regular basis. So in those spaces, you want to get to a space where you can have that conversation. But like, for example, the guy who called me a B-I-T-C-H, because I was driving poorly. Oh, that Asian American female who can't drive, right? I was feeling so funny about it. He was like, "You B," and I looked at him. I was like, I'm not gonna process it with him, right? But internally, I was like, "Oh shit, I feel bad. I feel bad. Oh wait, I don't have to feel bad. He's just like a really angry guy who's just like spitting stuff everywhere. I should feel bad for him." And then I drove off and I was like, "Bless you." And then I went on and had my day, right? And I think even in the workplace, you know, these conversations are so subtle that sometimes it doesn't have to be pinpointed, right? Like I said before, what I did with my client and what I did for myself as the communications director, I didn't call the reporters and be like, "Hey, you know, you were racist and you left us out of this story." Sometimes it had to get there and those conversations were had. But when it was a normal everyday thing, let me try changing my behavior first. And this is my style. Like like Kevin said, everyone's got a different way of approaching this. This is my style. That's what's cool about coaching is that everyone gets customized, personalized things that are working for your self-expression. So my style was, let me shift my behavior first and see if anything changes in the relationship. Because here's the thing, when we change, our entire world changes. If I start looking for these, you know, racist, right, microaggression type situations and start calling them opportunities, I'm gonna start doing all sorts of awesome stuff with my life, right? Like getting stories and stuff into papers. So start changing your behavior, see what else shifts, and then when things hit the fan, you're gonna have that conversation. You're gonna have it with grace, or however it is that, you know, your personality and your self-expression allows you to have it. So I would say follow your gut.
Thank you. So change your behavior. Bless you. That could be something you say. Do you guys have any input?
Okay, so in my experience as a student, I've often faced it from friends, right? They think they're making jokes, but it's really like, you're kind of funny, not really. So in my experience, I've kind of just approached them about it. I'm like, hey, so like, what did you really mean by this? And oftentimes, like, for example, once someone approached me about my Punjabi culture. They were like, oh, you guys are typical Punjabis, you know, you guys are like all, you know, fun and games, and then you guys drink a lot and everything. And I'm like, no, there's a lot more to our culture than just fun and games and, you know, what's in Bollywood. And I'm like, are you really basing your logic off of a movie? And she was like, yeah, you're right, Almeet. Like, I'm literally like judging you as I would judge a Punjabi in a movie. And like I feel like once you kind of address the situation, they see your side, and you don't necessarily have to do it in like, oh, like, what are you saying? Like, do you really mean that or anything? But it's just like, you know, just put it out there so that they can kind of step back and think about it and like say, hey, like maybe I didn't really mean this. Maybe I'm just saying it off the top of my head, but I'm not really thinking like what the actual consequences of it are. So these can apply to like all sorts of cultures, right? Like people are often making assumptions and they think it's a joke, and sometimes it's like, but no, it's not really a joke. So if you point it out, I feel like people will take a step back and be like, yeah, I guess you're right. And then you can just have a conversation about it. And then through that conversation, they'll learn of something, and they'll also be like, okay, like I won't bring it up again, or I'll be more careful next time. So that's what I've done in my experience.
Thank you, Almeet. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to start here, and then you're second. How about that? Yes.
I was just curious. You refer to yourself as first generation, but if you're born here, you're second generation. And so I'm wondering, how many of you find that, you know, as sort of a form of self-stereotyping? A lot of us believe we're only first generation when our roots are really deeper. Do you find any confusion over the use of the first and second generation terminologies? And I'm interested in all of you. How do you refer to
I always get confused because I guess you could be first generation. So the question is, some of our panelists, I think maybe I'll make you identified as a first generation immigrant. I don't know if that was a phrasing you.
A first generation American, as if I was the first one in my family to be born here. So I refer to myself as a first generation American.
Right, but if you call yourself that, then your parents are zero generation. They can Americanize, and that makes them first generation. So I'm wondering, do you all find any kind of confusion?
So I appreciate the question. I think one thing that is important for me is self-identifying. And so I hear what you're saying, because what ethnic studies and history says is that first generation means you're a person who immigrated. 1.5 generation means that you immigrated at teenage years, where you grew up enough in the country of origin. And then second generation traditionally means American born. And I think sometimes we get so stuck on semantics that sometimes we hurt each other or we're unable to hear each other's experiences. So for me, I feel similarly, where I would call myself a second generation Filipino American, but I would say I'm a first generation American born person. And then at the same time, it's also like if somebody calls themselves something and it's confusing to me or to others, I may ask them about it, but I guess I would just allow people to self-identify. I mean, especially when we have people with such complex identities, it's like me telling a multiracial person that they're not really multiracial because in reality you're biracial, or you're not really gay because you're more bisexual or queer, and I don't want to do that. So I think that in itself sometimes ends up being microaggressive and hurtful, and so that's something I don't want to do. But to answer your original question, from my perspective, so not from her perspective, is I do think sometimes we internalize that our parents are not American at all, and I think that is true, or that people who immigrate don't have an American experience. And so I think that is something that we still need to challenge at the same time of allowing people to self-identify.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I skipped over you.
Sorry, so I just had it was a direct response to your question. I've been talking a lot to a friend of mine who is first-year lawyer, first-year attorney in an all-white, all like Muslim male, like very dominant kind of culture, and she's experiencing a lot of microaggressions to the point where she's going to therapy. But the concept of just saying something is not something that's easy in environments that have really, where your job relies on playing with politics, right? So the advice that she gets whenever she tries to seek out advice is either say something or don't say anything at all because you're gonna get fired. So there's two very extreme responses that she usually gets, but none of them have answers in her situation right now. So I started to reach out to other like female Asian lawyers on her behalf, and they're all saying that they've gone through the same thing, but they can't say anything because she's not in a position of power.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had something very. So I would encourage, like all of our other panelists have said, to seek mentors who have gone through that experience before, because it can be really lonely out there, right? Especially in those places where we're the only ones. So I would do a couple of things. I would reach out to the people that connect her with those folks, is one, so that she doesn't feel like crazy. And the second is to kind of do a lot of the self-care that I was talking about before. Whether it is anything that helps build her personal power, whether that means physical exercise, whether that means a meditation practice, whether that means whatever type of self-care work that resonates with her, do it. It's so important. And I know with law firm hours, it's really difficult to do, but that's sometimes literally closing your eyes for 10 seconds and breathing deeply in your office has huge impact.
She goes to the bathroom.
Okay, so for her it's going to the bathroom, and that's like very early stages of just like getting to, not even coping, right? It's just starting to like let that stuff come through. But as she builds, as she talks through in therapy, as she builds her circle of network and friends who she can talk to, that's when continue to build her personal power. And then the third thing is that she gets to make a choice. Whenever you're in a situation, you always have a choice, whether you think you do or you don't. What's her choice?
What has her choice?
Oh, what's her ultimate choice?
Her ultimate choice is she loves her job and she loves the senior partner, but not. She loves
Perfect.
the partner, but not the senior.
Perfect. Perfect. So my answer was her ultimate choice is to quit, right? But I'm getting more information that she actually loves her job. So if she's chosen to stay in her position and she wants to excel and she actually really loves it, now you've chosen to be there, play the game, right? If she wants to develop that relationship with that senior partner, she can start, build that relationship. If she feels comfortable enough to share, start sharing. I mean, one of the biggest things I hear from one of my friends who does a lot of this training in corporate diversity work is that build the mentorship relationship. You can see it as being sly, but you can also see it as creating real relationships and real networking and building your tribe. So there's some reason why she's resonating with that guy. There's some shared values, some shared vision. So the more you build that, the more he feels like he's helping her, the more she helps him, he gets to look good. The more that connection is built, the more she'll continue to uplift. Hope that helps.
So for me, I think everything that everyone is saying is very helpful. I think one thing that David alluded to that maybe, for me, I feel like it needs to be reiterated and screamed more is that, yes, we have our personal choices and we cope in different ways, but we also have to recognize that there is systemic racism and discrimination in this world. So the fact that your friend is going to therapy, it's not just, one, there's nothing wrong with that. If you need to go to therapy to deal with any life problem, that's wonderful and that's great. And if one of your life problems is dealing with everyday microaggressions, then yes, that's a wonderful thing to do to cope and to heal. But two, there's also a point where we have to realize that even if we were the strongest, most resilient people in the world, that if systemic racism is still there, we can only go so far. And so I like everything that Gloria and David and Ami is saying in terms of how we personally deal with it, but I also think we need to also change the systems. And so if we can change the system in that she's not the only Asian woman there, she's not the only person of color there, that she's supported, that the culture is different, that people know that being a person of color matters, that race matters, that people aren't colorblind, that people have policies and laws in place that say that that culture is bad and wrong and hurtful, then unless that's in place, then your friend and other people are going to continue to experience that. And so I think while we wait for that, we have all these great things that we can do, but we also have to realize that that's going to take a while for those two things to meet. And so I think we have to do our own taking care of ourselves, but we also need to know that the system needs to make changes and recognize that. And it's not your fault that you are experiencing microaggressions and are sad about it, but that it's the system's fault that you're experiencing microaggressions and they're not doing anything about it.
Thank you. I want to make sure we get to multiple questions. So I'm going to just get, how about 3 questions, and then we'll throw it and I'll come back. So, yes, you, sir?
Yeah, my question is actually kind of along the lines of what you were just saying about the system. So in looking at the program and the handouts, it says that Asian American youth report higher levels of depressive symptoms than their non-Asian peers, and also that Asian American youth experience bullying at rates higher than any other racial group. And I was curious, what is it about our system that leads this to be the case? And is there anything being done currently, or what should be done to address this for Asian American youth? This seems like to me like a very particular problem that.
So the question is, why is it so prevalent in the Asian American
Yes.
community?
Yeah, and then what specific solutions or tactics should we be trying to address this on a systemic level? Because if the problem is a systemic problem, then the solution should be a systemic solution as well. What does that look like?
Okay, so that's the first question. Let's get 2 more in. Yes?
Hi, sorry, I have a sore throat. My question actually has to deal with media portrayals of the Asian American community. I'm actually a psychology student at Columbia. Shout out to Columbia. I'm also a member of the Asian American Psych Association. Shout out to Kevin. And I assist in research in social identity and stigma. I'm also doing some neuroscience research on child and adolescent emotional development and when they start to get exposed to social identity categorization. I'm training to pursue doctoral programs in social neuroscience to explore these questions of how stereotyping and microaggressions impact our health mentally, physiologically. And so there was recently an op-ed article on the New York Times, I'm sure we're all aware of it, Nicholas Kristof's The Asian Advantage. And he discusses various aspects of explaining why Asians in America are, quote, more disproportionately successful. We all know this, mono-minority myth. And in one part of his article, he describes a psych study conducted by researchers who randomly assigned students who were purportedly to succeed. And it was completely random, and later on they did succeed because these teachers sort of underwent a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they did well. So he coins this term stereotype promise, which is like really interesting and problematic to me. And it seems the media is very dedicated and rather obsessed with exploring these issues of Asian advantage and Asian success that's, as many of us in here are aware, are actually way more complex and negative to mental, behavioral, physical health. So these, lack of a better word, shout outs to the Asian stereotype of intelligence, we know can be very helpful. Sorry, this is a very long-winded question, a little bit of background. Basically, my goal, I want to use the science that I researched to deconstruct and break this stereotype down, just to, because people believe in health. What harms your health is bad, and this is bad for you. So, but how can we possibly compete with all these media shout-outs towards the Asian stereotype and this advantage? If I want to like publish on neuroscience and physiology that prejudicial processing, stereotype processing is incredibly harmful over time, will that ever pique interest of readers who aren't Asian and have the potential to influence the turn of the public's view on our population and just that in general?
So how, I'm trying to summarize this, how do we address the microaggressions that are kind of packed into this model minority myth or this idea that Asian Americans are better advantaged than other racial groups? Is that in the media? Okay, how do we deal with that in the media? Okay, so I'm gonna get one more question, and we're gonna get some answers. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I mean, to counter Nicholas, there was another article by New York Times, a Korean philosopher who wrote an article about this, maybe about the solution for the world change and so on, about racism and so on. But then he kind of terminated like there would be Harry if the world became what we expect it to become. I mean, the true love and peace and so on.
So the question is...
Well, my question is like the continuous perpetuation of the same ideology of stereotypical analyzation of Asians and always throwing the carrot in front of us that role models are always like, this session today felt like how to become a new role model by using microaggressions. I'm too old to do that because I have more microaggressions against me and I'm retired. And I'm now at the point where I've been evicted from Park Slope, so I've been downsized to the point of working with the Gowanus Superfund, neighbors, activism, and I'm the only Asian who would speak out. And one of the problems with how they divide and conquer the housing projects considered all black, and why their piping are clogged, and the housing authority says it's because you guys are cooking too many fried food down the drain and causing, and so like this is upper authority, director of housing authority telling people do not put the grease down the pipes to clog up the sewage, which causes, and there's only one pipeline in the Gowanus for the whole sewage, as opposed to 700 new units being built in an overcrowded neighborhood. So, I mean, well, I'm talking about like the growth of this humongous problem and the microaggressions. Oh, okay, where are the macroaggressions to make those changes for the future?
It sounds like this question gets to maybe a little bit what Kevin was talking about, that it's not just microaggressions and not just one-to-one interactions, it's about maybe some systemic issues that we're dealing with. But let's start with the first question we got, which is why is this issue, microaggressions, based on these research, this study, why does it seem to be so prevalent, especially in the Asian American community? I'm going to throw that to Kevin, then. Okay, David first.
Yeah, I think there are some themes in these questions, you know, and I was remembering, you know, Kevin, your results from your studies where you did these sessions with different communities of color, and you were able to sort of find certain very common strains, right? That people have said about their experiences. And when I was learning about these issues in college, what I realized was, you know, when we think of microaggressions, we almost always think about, you know, our own experiences and our own, you know, kind of narrowly think about, you know, how it's affected individual people. But I think one thing we have to remember is that all of these narratives, they come from history, right? And in order to sort of learn how they came about, how to take them apart, you have to learn about history, right? And so, for example, you know, like Asian Americans, they, you know, at the very beginning, they came to this country. And there's a very good new book about this. You know, I think it's called "The Making of Two Asian Americas." You know, Asian American communities were you know, useful primarily for labor, right? So what has happened when, you know, we've you know, exceeded our usefulness, right? These narratives persist, right? And these narratives, you know, they exist to sort of make use of our existence in this heterogeneous you know, country. But you know, they're yeah. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. You know, there's a lot that we can go on all day about, you know, kind of what they are, right? And you know, but at the end of the day, we have to recognize where they come from, right? And go to the roots of these ideas, right? They're not just as old as we are. These ideas are as old as you know, Western civilization. Right?
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to
Can I
add?
answer here for that question? I want to introduce Sonia. She's executive director of SIA, South Asian Youth Action. She's one of our member agencies, and she actually does a ton of work around this issue. And her organization, I'm so sorry she did this. She's here as an unsuspecting guest, right? So but I do want to refer you to her work. And so, Sonia, if you want to talk about why the work that you do with the kids.
I mean, I'll just briefly, you know, in addition to SIA, there's other organizations in New York City, sort of that serve the Pan-Asian Pacific Islander community, and you know, organizations like AAF, you know, who sponsored this panel tonight, as well as CACF, deal a lot with sort of the larger policy macro issues, advocating to government agencies and making sure that, you know, these statistics and, you know, the work that all the member agencies do is out in the public. Those for families and young people to utilize the resources, but also for the larger community to be more informed. And then there are organizations like SIA, South Asian Youth Action, the Sea Coalition, you know, there's Chinatown Manpower, there's lots of other organizations that directly work with youth in this community to
to support them and develop into strong individuals.
Sorry, Sonia. Oh, no, that's okay. Feel free to, come over and ask me more questions after.
Thank you. Back to the second question, I think was, I hope I'm summarizing this correctly, which is media portrayals of Asian Americans. They can also contain microaggressions, perceived microaggressions. How do we address that? I want to take that on.
I mean, again, I think we could do a lot of things individually, but I think it is a systemic issue. And I love what David said about it all being related back to history, because I think everything goes back to the systems of racism and oppression in this country. And so it goes to why do we have negative media against portrayals against Asian Americans? Because of the historical context of Asian Americans in this country. Why are Asian Americans getting bullied? Because educators aren't taught about Asian Americans or how to be culturally competent in working with our Asian American students, which is based on the historical context of Asian Americans, which is also based on the negative media portrayals of Asian Americans and the perpetuation of the model minority myth. So teachers don't do anything or say anything when their students are getting bullied. Perhaps they might do something with groups that they're more educated about, or maybe they might bully, or they might address bullying when they believe that it's actually going to affect them. So because people believe that, or teachers, educators, principals believe that Asian Americans are the model minority myth, they're more likely to not do anything. They're less likely to have any sort of systemic policy that has to do with Asian American cultural competence in their classroom settings that would look differently than any other historically marginalized groups, where they might have something that addresses that group in some way. Even think of it that down to as simple as, is Asian American Heritage Month celebrated in the school systems? It's not most of the time across the United States. Maybe not in New York, but across the United States. And so when children aren't taught anything about their history and educators aren't learning that Asian Americans need to be empowered and uplifted in this way, then bullying will continue to persist. And all these other systems then feed into each other, and then this is why it continues to be a problem. And then with microaggressions, what was found is that a lot of Asian Americans experience more microaggressions than they do overt discrimination, versus African Americans experience just as many microaggressions as they do overt discrimination. And so because Asian Americans are portrayed as the model minority, oh, microaggressions are nothing, at least they're not getting overtly discriminated, and oh, at least they're doing well in their careers and in terms of their socioeconomic status. And so now it's something that it continues to make Asian Americans invisible in our country. So again, I don't want to drop the mic, but I'm going to say, you got to change the system.
Can I answer part of that? Some of the work that we do as the nonprofit community is actually trying to ask DOE, what is the process when a parent needs to report that their kid is being bullied? Is there a process? Do the schools know it? What's the record keeping? Like, how do you know what the process is if you don't reach out? How many languages are these being, addressed in? How do parents know if my kid has funny, like comes home and doesn't want to go to school and has all these symptoms? What's the process to report, right? So these are all the things that we as a nonprofit community we're trying to address. Kevin is absolutely right. It's a systemic problem. We fail our kids, but the institution, the education system also fails our kids too. So you're welcome to join us and do this work with us.
I'm going to take one more question, and because this is going to be the last question, I'm going to cut you off if it's not a question, so I apologize. So let's see. You're closest, so I might as well.
Hi. Do you have any thoughts on why there are so few Asian women on the judiciary? Do you think that the stereotypes play a role in that?
Why are there so few women in the judiciary? In the judiciary, in the courts?
Yeah.
Supreme Court, lower courts? Okay. Anyone? I guess this maybe reflects back to what Kevin was talking about in terms of just there maybe needs to continue work on better representation and diversity. I guess we have just one more question, and I'll come to you, sir.
Hi, I think you all share a lot of about your childhood story, and I'm just wondering, since your parents might experience different things from you guys, and what would be your advice, or maybe you think, oh, I wish my parent, my dad had done something to me, or I wish I had communicated with my dad, my mom about such kind of feeling. So, well, what things you want to do when you become a parent, or what advice to immigrant parents, right? Thank you.
So what advice do you have for immigrant parents who are dealing with these issues with their own children?
Hi. This is a hard question. This is a really sensitive question. And it's sensitive for, I'll speak for myself. It is a sensitive question for me because, our parents have done so much for us. So it's hard to say, oh, I would like them to do anything different, right? Because they've done so much for us. They've done the best that they can. And it's also cultural things too, right? And so some of what we're talking about with microaggressions, some of the impact on our psyche with respect to microaggressions of feeling not important, feeling small, feeling invisible has a lot to do with, speaking for me, how I was raised as a Chinese American girl and how I'm supposed to behave. This is not, I have a very loud, dominant, like Cantonese mama bear, right? Who showed me, and people in this room who know my mama know that she was, I had a role model of this really loud Chinese woman. So there's nothing taught me that I needed to be quiet, except for the fact that as a young Chinese girl, I'm not supposed to speak at the table. And the only words that I spoke to adults growing up was, hello, auntie, hello, uncle, that's it. And you just be quiet. You don't say anything. Even up until I graduated from school. And all of a sudden I graduate law school and everyone expects me to have an opinion. I'm like, I don't even know how to talk to you as an adult, as a human being. To the point where like when I'm law school, I'm like shaking, trying to like raise my hand. I'm sitting there. So I would say for how I want to parent in the future is, I feel kind of silly because now I bring my little kid, he's 1 year old, with my Taiwanese American friend, and he's like throwing all this food all around. And I'm like, I'm not going to parent any other way because I want him to be free. But I feel guilty because I don't want her to judge me for my bad Chinese parenting skills. It's kind of so I want to create space for my kids to have emotions. I want to create space for them to have choices. I want to create space for them to be who they are unconditionally, but at the same time be able to honor the aspects of my culture and my heritage and my ancestry that I think are so rich. I hope that answers the question.
I'll be now come back to you, David.
Okay, so for this question, that kind of hits home for me because as I said earlier, I am the oldest in my family. I'm the first one to be born here. I was basically the first one that went through everything so that my sister could, kind of take my mistakes into advice, be like, oh, okay, I'll do this. I won't do what Didi did. So this, I feel like here is where the term generation gap comes in. And often us, as youth, I can speak for my youth community. We're like, oh, this generation gap just kills us. It's just because they don't understand what's happening to us, and we don't understand what's happening to them. And I feel like it's generation gap has been used. The word generation gap has been used so much that it has like a negative connotation now. And our youth doesn't realize that sometimes our parents are trying their best to understand, but because they grew up in like different circumstances, because the culture was different, the environment was different, that it's hard for them to understand what's going on over here. And sometimes our youth isn't able to talk to our parents, because I know some cases where the youth is just like, if they're getting bullied, they don't want to trouble their parents anymore because they think that, our parents are already going through so many struggles that why would we tell them, this is happening to me at school, like why would we burden them with more? So my advice to parents would just be that if your child wants to talk, if your child wants to explore a little, kind of let them explore, but then at the same time, like, don't let them completely, like, just lose themselves and become assimilated, because that's the difference between kind of completely letting go, completely being the opposite of your parents, just being like, oh, like, this generation gap sucks, I'm gonna be the complete opposite of my parents. No. Like, I know many kids who do that, and then they're like, wait, like, who am I now? Like, I'm just I'm just like everyone else. So then, as a parent, I feel like to the immigrant parents, I would say that, let them explore a little, but then at the same time, make sure that, like, they know how much culture they want to keep. So that's all I would say.
Okay, we're gonna give the last word to David.
This is also a question that's kind of very close to me, I always think about what my parents must think about my experience, right? They they're also immigrants, but they didn't grow up the way that I did, right? And their concerns were a lot different. And I think because of that, just like Amit, you said, it's hard for immigrants and their children to see a lot of things in the same light. I think the idea behind microaggressions is really that the power of the idea comes from your past experiences, right? And it makes complete sense to me why my parents might come here, have found a job, and view certain experiences as not not as big a problem as I might have. But I think that's why it's important to share our experiences, really talk about it between generations, and come to kind of let them see how you see things, and vice versa. Yeah, so.
Thank you, David. And I'm going to close it out saying thank you very much to all of our panelists tonight. They're going to stick around. Let's give them a hand.
This conversation wouldn't have been possible without you. Kevin, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan, so I have a little celebrity crush on you. Almi, thank you so much for coming out on your first panel. I would have been shaking my boots, but you did a great job. David, thank you so much for coming all the way from Boston to share your experience with us. He has his GREs tomorrow, so good luck. Woo! And Gloria, thanks so much for traveling all the way from DC to share your expertise with us as well. So I'm going to try to talk really fast, but also slow down, because my executive directors always like you talk way too fast. The reason that we had this panel discussion is when we started this whole youth and mental health initiative work last year, we really felt that microaggressions was something that rarely gets addressed, but it's something that affects every single one of us. And as former college students, young professionals, we never had the space to really talk about this growing up, and if we had, I think, myself personally, some of my other friends and whomever, I think we would have suffered a lot. We would have been able to combat our sense of isolation and depression a lot better, and rather than internalizing a lot of these experiences, thinking that we were crazy, right? So our main purpose is to start this dialogue and conversation around microaggressions, systemic injustice, and being able to give our youth a space to talk about this really important issue. As a former teacher, and I have fellow teachers out there, I know that as in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, it is so important to be aware of this issue so that we can create a space for our students to be able to acknowledge and address, and then hopefully be able to act on and find some sort of empowerment from their past experiences. So quick plug, please sign up for our newsletter on our website. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, at AA Federation. We have a lot more of these events coming up. We have a Young People's Conference coming up early next year, talking about a lot of these issues that we find so important. If you want to connect with Gloria, there's a mailing list she has in the back by the door. Yep, if you can sign up there. And you can always just go on our website and subscribe to our email. One last thing. I am going to be sending everyone a survey just to ask for your feedback on these events. We take your feedback really seriously because it helps us inform our planning for what kinds of topics we want to cover in the coming months. So please don't delete it, because sometimes I do that with things. But please, your feedback is so, so important. And I really thank all of you for coming out and staying out this late. Thanks so much.